Are you trying to get into animation? Discover how to stand out among hundreds of applicants, when and how to send the perfect email, and learn how to avoid the biggest mistakes that might be holding you back.
Submit applications, but I never hear back. Or what's the best way to network? What's a bad way to network? How do I stay calm during an interview?
Ariel Goldberg, Director of Talent Acquisition with experience at Disney, Nickelodeon, and Skydance Animation, is here to help. He started as a concept artist, so he's been on both sides of the table. Watch until the end because right after our chat, you'll hear him answer key questions that made me run to rewrite my resume from scratch. Hey storytellers, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Pietro, I'm an Italian animation writer and producer, and on this channel we help you become a better storyteller and thrive in the animation industry together with the top talent from the films you love. And since you're about to learn a ton about networking, here's a free PDF guide that you can fill up to prepare for your next animation event. The link is down below. Ariel, welcome to Write for Animation. It's amazing to have you here.
It's great to be here.
So we want to help our audience and chat a little bit about how to make the most out of a film festival. And you're a recruiter, you have a lot of experience on both sides, I guess, in terms of, both receiving portfolios and resumes. And I know a lot of people are nervous. I used to be nervous and, hide in a corner and pretend I would be on my phone instead of connecting with people. But I was missing out so much. So this conversation would be to explore a little bit about your experience and also, some tips that they're practical. That's what we love here at Write for Animation.
Sure, yeah. I can really relate to the feeling of being nervous because some people know this, some people don't, but I actually started as a character designer and animator. And so when I started going to film festivals and expos, I was going as a young artist who was still in school, who was trying to break in, and I felt all this pressure to show everyone I could my portfolio. I didn't even sometimes know what I was showing up for. I just knew I had to be there. And then once I was there, I didn't really have a plan and I was trying to come up with what to do. And then as my career went on, at first randomly, I was in between jobs. There was a great opportunity to 3-month contract to try being a recruiting coordinator. I thought, maybe that would be something in between positions. And then I stuck with it. And now I've been recruiting for 10 or 11 years.
Wow.
And seeing it from the other side, for me, it's become very clear what I was doing wrong. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of young people doing things very right and doing things very wrong. And sometimes it's the same people, and that's just the way it naturally is. And I think a lot of it comes from this pressure that we impose on ourselves as artists, especially when you're young and you're starting your career, and you really want to make a great first impression. And I think the first thing that everyone has to remember is everyone is a person, and we all, even those people that weren't artists before, like myself, but everyone understands what it is like to interview. All of us have the jobs that we have now because we had to go through an interview too. And we know that sitting through an interview or a portfolio review, it's the least natural way for two human beings to interact because there's this strange power dynamic and you're stressing so much. And I think there's a double factor to the stress. One is just the natural stress of you want to do a good job. But then there's also the stress of what if I mess up? What if I don't do a good job? And you start getting in your head. And then as soon as you get in your head, maybe you stutter or maybe you don't say something clearly. And then you start fearing, oh no, I'm appearing nervous. And then you start worrying how you're looking, and then that makes you more nervous. And it turns into this spiral. And the thing I just want everyone to remember is it's okay to be nervous. If you give yourself permission to be nervous, you will neutralize 90% of what will actually make you nervous. Because 10% is just that natural initial wanting to make a good impression. 90% is all the random thoughts that get into our head. So just eliminate that, because all of us who are interviewing you, reviewing your portfolio, we all know what you're going through. We all went through it ourselves. If we see you being nervous, we're actually going to be very sympathetic. We understand. We've been there too. So don't worry if you seem nervous. You're allowed to be nervous. And by giving yourself that permission, you won't be as much. That's my philosophy.
That's perfect. I'm gonna apply this right now.
Don't be nervous.
Okay, it's great because at the end of the day, what I think about a scenario like that is that we have this idea that, the power scenario, that they have the opportunity to give me a job. But at the same time, you're also on their side. Everybody wants a great story. Everybody wants a great candidate.
You put it really well. We are on the side of the candidate because all of us, we are looking for somebody that we could hire, especially those of us who are recruiters, but not even recruiters, art directors, anybody. Everybody has a boss, right? And so all of us want to find the right person for the positions that we have open at our companies. And we are under a lot of pressure to find the right person. So when you sit down to meet with us, we have nothing but goodwill for you. All we're hoping is that you will be great. Nobody is sitting there going, "Oh, I hope you fail. I hope you fail." Why would we? That would be doing ourselves a disservice. We only wish you the best. And we also know what it takes to get to that level. And when we meet with somebody who it turns out maybe needs a little bit more time, needs a little bit more experience, needs a little bit more advice, that doesn't turn us off or make us upset. That turns on the other reason that we're there, right? So we go out of, when we see, okay, this portfolio isn't quite ready, we click out of the hiring mode and we click into the advice mode. And we want to give you good advice because we want this industry to have more good artists. So it's all positive. None of it is negative.
I've seen you at many events, Lightbox was the last time, and I can tell that you're genuinely interested because I see people, sometimes those are, I imagine, tough days, like long hours of, one after the other. And that's something that tells me that, you're on their side. And it's great to have a background like yourself as a character artist and knowing what's that like to be on the other side. And so taking a step back, because many people are worried that, okay, how do I get to the interview? It's so hard to get to that first filter. We're right for animation. We believe that everybody's a writer in terms that everybody's telling the story. So
100%.
Story artist, biz dev, everything. And so I imagine that you review mainly art portfolios?
Yeah, it depends what we're hiring for at the time. Right now we have a big push, especially in our Madrid and UK divisions, for technical directors. And then recently I've been working with our software engineers. And sometimes I'm staffing for the finance department. So it's not always artists. But when I go to these expos, to these film festivals, mostly it's artists. Those are most of the people who show up, artists, writers, directors, story artists. And because I come from art and that's what I know best, that is what I tend to focus on. I wouldn't be the right person to give portfolio advice to a rigger. I know rigging, I hire for rigging, but as far as like what I can just say without even having to think, I can give good advice to artists. So typically, yes, when I come here, I want to be useful to the attendees. And so I try to be as useful as I can. And for me, that's giving advice on art, but it's also 3D art, modeling, story. They can be long days, but it's always worthwhile, It's good to give
connect.
To connect.
We covered the secret to not be nervous, just accept, be nervous. Everybody knows that's gonna happen. What are some other pitfalls or things that maybe people worry too much about that maybe are not important from your side?
Yeah, and I also just realized I didn't answer your other question, which is how do you actually get to the interview? So I'll leave that in as well. So things that people worry about too much. I think sometimes people worry too much if their portfolio has every style for every possible company. If they're writers, for instance, if they're treatments, if they're spec scripts, if they cover everything. And the thing is, you can't cover everything. You know yourself, you have certain interests, you gravitate towards certain things. And the reality is that in a studio like ours, and I've worked for bigger studios and I've worked for smaller studios. Yes, there are smaller studios that are looking for a generalist who can do many different things. But by and large, we are looking for a well-rounded team. We don't need each individual to be able to do everything. Because if you do this really well, say you can do background layouts really well, you can design them really well, but you're not very good with color. You don't paint the backgrounds. That's okay. We'll hire somebody who does the painting. And let's say you can design great characters, but you can't really render texture very well. It's okay, we'll hire somebody who specializes in rendering texture. You know what you gravitate toward naturally, you know what you have a strength in, you know what you like to do. My advice is, and it's scary advice to take, because when you pick sometimes when you open one door, it doesn't feel like you opened a door. It feels like you shut all the other possible doors. But the thing is, you can only go down one path at a time. You only have 2 legs. So pick a path. That's the scariest thing, is making a decision. But the reality is that there is no path that is the wrong path. Every path can be the right path, and every path can be the wrong path. It depends on your own work ethic, your own determination. So don't worry so much that my portfolio doesn't have, if you're a story artist, my portfolio doesn't have enough action sequences. Not everybody does action. And maybe you do comedy really well, or maybe you do those quiet, tender moments between 2 people very well, or maybe you do action really well. Play to your strengths, and yes, you'll miss some opportunities because some opportunities will call for the thing that you didn't put into your portfolio. But that's okay, because somebody else is missing the opportunity that you got because he or she didn't put that into their portfolio. Right. So that's, I think, the main thing that people concern themselves with, is trying to do everything. You have to realize you're not God. Yeah. you have a physical limit, you have a body. But within those limits, you can really perfect something if you work hard at it.
Yeah, and I think that translates to writing as well in general, to know yourself as a writer that has a sensibility and a voice. And I think that sometimes we do try, I want a horror sample and then a romantic comedy and then dramedy. I find myself, and that I see that in many writers, that there's a specific voice, and that's what makes it interesting about it. I remember an example from one of our guests, and she said that, she was super focused on these beautiful pieces of art, but then a big studio focused more on her personal panels that she was posting on Instagram. And they were rough, they were a little more intimate and personal. So is that something that you see across the different, being a writer or an artist, a visual artist, that you're looking for a voice, or it depends on the position?
We're definitely looking for a specific voice. That's the challenge, right? Is you want your work to have some amount of commercial appeal, so that somebody will pay you money to do it. Some people think that to have commercial appeal means you sold out, that you betrayed the purity of the art. But you have to remember, Michelangelo
absolutely
was an artist for hire. He was a commissioned artist. There's nothing wrong with it, but you do also have to have a voice, and you have to strike that balance. We, being recruiters and art directors, we see portfolio trends. There was a period when everyone started revisiting Mary Blair in some style. And then there was a period when everybody was doing some form of anime, and you see these trends. And that's totally fine, because as artists, as writers, you copy the masters, you get inspiration from somewhere. But to really break through, you bring something new and something original to the conversation. And it's easier to do this now than ever before. Because if we're talking 15 years ago, television was pre-programmed and they were playing for a more general audience. Things were, and I'm not knocking it, there was some amazing television, but things had to have more mass appeal because you needed the whole country or the whole world to be watching this show on this specific night. And there wasn't as much room for more niche voices. Now, I love historical fiction. You used to see one thing on PBS once a year, that was like some historical drama or something, some miniseries. Now, you see a lot of it. You have all, because it's become much more a la carte. It's the
What's your favorite show now?
My favorite show within the historical genre is now a little bit dated, but I loved Mad Men.
Oh, okay.
But now anything that's set in the 20th century, my favorite show right now, I really loved The Crown, which just finished. It's funny because I don't follow the politics or lives of the British royal family in real life at all, but on the screen and drama form with actors, thought it was brilliant. I really love Palm Royale, which is a good show right now, very well written. Yeah, there's these more niche subject matter, so you really can have your own voice, and you should. But you should find what in your voice speaks to a broader audience. Say you want to tell a story about a particular time or a particular culture, but you have to understand that most people aren't from that time or aren't from that culture. And so how do you express this in a way that is both genuine and true, but in a way that people from all over the world and from our modern time and perspective will understand. If you're making a medical drama or a courtroom drama, you have to make sure it is understandable to people who are not doctors or lawyers, you know? So yeah, be original, be true to your voice, find your voice, copy the masters, but if you're copying, don't put that in your portfolio. And you know, the best way to find originality, sometimes I look at portfolios and I can immediately see which artist this person is influenced by, because this young artist hasn't yet found his own voice yet, and he still or she is still mostly copying other artists. The best thing you can do is, if there's an artist you really love or a writer you really love, research who that artist's influences were, and then find those and research who their influences were. Once you unpack it, it becomes much less about copying and much more about finding the roots of what made that appealing to you. Then you're not just copying, then you're actually finding the source, and expressing that source in your own way. I
love that.
Sense.
No, totally. Yeah, that's a great tip. And it's something that I've kind of been on a mission with this, because I'm a writer, I'm working in animation. I relate to many young writers that we believe we could contribute to, let's say, a big studio that's creating mainstream films. And there's only one writer or just a few writers per project. And without having artistic skills, focused on one craft, then it's so hard to get in. And so, for example, I remember years ago, I was like, I know I could be so valuable to the team, but there will never be an opening for, story brain, and that is not the main writer. And most recruiters in the studios, I mean, the system they used to find writers is, agents submitting to the development and reader. So it's really so many steps. And I wonder if there's something I'm not aware of. What could be some positions, entry-level positions, or ways to put your foot in the door and show, I'm a story brain, I love animation, I love the medium, I want to contribute, I want to be part of this. And I'm on a mission because I do believe there's value. I mean, we can bring a lot of value, but I couldn't crack the code on how to propose myself, for example, but I know it relates to many people.
I have some thoughts. I didn't write the gospel, so take this with a grain of salt. So I've met a lot of very successful, and I've worked with a lot of very successful writers in animation and artists in animation who did not manage to get their start at a studio doing what they really wanted to be doing. And the ones that I found who were most successful typically did two things at the same time. First, they acknowledged, okay, whether it's because my skills aren't there yet, or maybe it's just because I'm not known yet and there aren't that many positions, but for one reason or another, I'm not getting the job that I ultimately want right now. So rather than just beating my head against the wall until somebody takes pity on me, I need to find another way into the studio.
Yeah.
Because once you're inside the studio, it doesn't matter if you came in through the mailroom or if you came in as an executive assistant or whatever the case is. Once you are inside the studio, it is so much easier to get to where you want to go than if you're waiting on the outside, only saying I'm gonna get in as a writer.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I would say, let's focus on writing for a sec. If you really want to be a writer and your writing isn't getting you the opportunities yet, I would recommend doing some work that will start proving on your resume, on your CV, that you have executive assistant skills, that you have organizational skills, that you have time management skills. And once you have a little bit of that on your resume, then you start applying to the studios that you want to work at as an executive assistant, but you have to be a little bit focused. You don't want to just be an executive assistant to the finance department, or if you want to be a writer. You want to try to go into current series or development, or you want to be a writer's assistant, or you want to be an assistant to a director and a producer. Something that's kind of a low bar for entry, but there's a trick to this too, because a lot of people have this idea that, okay, maybe I'll try for the job that doesn't require as much experience. But that means that those are the jobs that get the most applicant. And so what you want to do is be going to events as much as possible. And, the pandemic was terrible, but one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that so much now is virtual. And so you don't always have to buy a plane ticket and a hotel and transportation and food. You can just log on and go to some of these events and start meeting people, because so many of these entry-level positions, we give them to people that they have to apply, they have to go through the interview process, but just to get the interview and just to get your foot in the door, it's good if you already know somebody or if you have some kind of reputation. So you start reaching out, you start contacting recruiters, you start contacting producers, and slowly you start it takes time. It takes time. Whatever craft you're in, whether you're writing or you're drawing, you can always find the shortcuts on your keyboard. There's no shortcut to time. Time takes time. And relationships, if they're anything at all, they're an investment of time. So you build it, it'll take a little while, and then you start applying for these jobs, and now you're not just some random person who's applying. Now you're somebody who's actually met these recruiters and met these producers and met these heads of development. And so you apply for this job, you get in, and now you're inside the studio and you're in one of the departments that can help get you to where you want. And you show them that you love the job that you have for the first year. Maybe not the first year, but for the first 8 or 10 months, you don't even mention your other aspirations. You just do your job really, really well. No one wants to see you come into a job and immediately say, I want the next thing, you know?
Of course.
People are saying, okay, well, prove yourself a little.
There's also a lot to learn, I think, that
There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn, and we hired you for this job because this job needed to get done.
Yeah.
So prove that you are reliable, prove that you are dependable, prove that you want to be of service. That's actually the biggest thing. These days, not just these days, I think all the time, people think they're going to win over a recruiter or a hiring manager through sympathy, or pity, and say, I've been trying so hard and I have these dreams. And we do care about your dreams. We're not inhuman, we're not cold. We do care. But if I'm hiring somebody, I'm not spending my own money, I'm spending my company's money. I can't spend someone else's money on my feelings of empathy for you. I have to be responsible. So I'm not going to hire you because I feel sympathy, even though I might feel a lot of sympathy, but I will hire you if I get the sense that you want to be of use, and if you want to be of service. And that's what we all have to do. And it's actually very satisfying. Not that you got something, but the feeling that you gave something. It's the most satisfying feeling. And once you start doing that on the job, then people say, okay, well, I know you don't want to be an assistant forever, so what do you want to do? Because we like having you around and we don't want to lose you and you have dreams, so what do you want to do? And we start catering to your desires. Now, that won't happen in every company. Sometimes you have to bounce around a little bit. And the other thing that you should be doing at the same time is, and this is what a lot of people don't realize, is they think a bunch of people apply to a job, and then recruiters and hiring managers, we go through all the people who applied, or some amount of people who applied, and we start the interviews out of that group. That's partly right. But also, recruiters, hiring managers, we already have lists of people that we have been following for a long time on their Instagram, on their Twitter, on their websites, whatever the case may be. We have artists and writers that we have been dying to work with, right? So a lot of people are applying, and some of them will be people that we know, and some of them will be people that we don't, but we are also chasing certain people. So while young artists are chasing us, we're also chasing artists and writers that have already been working, that have already proven themselves, because we're already very excited about them. And oftentimes those are people who are just doing their own thing and posting it online. And we can and we should, and I do criticize social media for a lot of things. Yeah. But one of the great things about social media and the algorithms of social media is that if I'm a writer and I start following this writer that I like, and this writer follows me back, and then the algorithm might say, well, if you like this writer, you might like these writers too. And we start finding each other, and we start obsessing with each other and going, oh my God, you feel like you made a discovery. I discovered this writer. So you also want to be doing your own writing, doing your own art, posting it online, whether you're doing webcomics or if you're, writing short stories or articles, comical little essays for The Atlantic or The New Yorker or whatever it may be, and getting your name out there and becoming one of those writers that is being chased. So you're not just doing the chasing, we're starting to see our algorithm say, hey, you might be interested in this person. So it's a multi-pronged attack. You go to the festivals, you start to get to know people. If you can't afford a festival or an expo in any way, shape, or form, look up people's emails. They're really not that hard to find. You could do a Google search of what is the email format for Skydance Animation, and you will find us. You will literally...
I love that you shared that.
No, but I mean, it's not a secret. You'll find, there are a few different versions of the email format, and you just try those different versions. Maybe you put them all on the BCC line. That way, only the correct one gets through.
Exactly.
And you start
getting great.
Yeah, you get creative. And in the meantime, you are taking those positions that you can get right now, since you're not getting the ones that you want yet. And you are still doing your own work. And if you're young and you have the energy, look, I'm not at the end of my life yet. I'm 38 years old, but I already don't have the energy that I had at 28. And at 28, I didn't have the energy that I had at 18. So yes, what I'm recommending requires a lot of work, but this is the time to do it. You will never have the energy to go on 4 hours of sleep after you leave your 20s, okay? It's do it now. Do it now. And the more effort you put in now, the more it will pay you back later. All of us want the same thing. All of us want to have a dignified, comfortable retirement, So it's like, but that requires a lot of hard work and energy when you're young.
And an adventure. I think that what I love about this community is that it's so collaborative, and I think it circles back what you were sharing, the attitude of giving, to understand that you are valuable. And I think that something that you might feel or be in a position of need, I'm needy, I want this. Like many people saying, I would swipe the floor at Disney or Skydance. I would share in our communities, they don't need people to swipe the floor. They need somebody talented, and sometimes the best way is to honing your skills and putting yourself out there. Something we started doing, for example, is pairing up, a writer with something I've did in the past, and a story artist, and create an animatic together. And we just put out the animatic, and maybe somebody bumps into that, and it could be interesting. It's a good way to showcase your voice and put yourself out there. And I love how practical your advice is. I would love to go back a little bit to, you mentioned the silver lining of the pandemic, the normalization of Zoom. I think it's amazing. I mean, there's nothing like being here, getting to chat directly. It's a great advantage. And, for example, studios like Skydance and other studios, they have international presence. And I'm from Italy, and I spent some time in LA, but now I live here in Mexico. The international community is growing, and remote work is getting more accepted. And I was wondering about some tips that you can give to people that maybe are not US citizens, or people that are thinking maybe, I would love to go to work at Skydance, for example, but I know they have a studio in Madrid as well, or other companies. Can you tell us a little bit how the dynamics of international hiring and things like that?
Yeah. So first of all, one thing to understand is we use as a sort of shorthand the expression that this company or this studio it'll sponsor me for a visa. That's not wrong, but it also implies in a way that everything is in control of the company. Visas are not given out by companies, they're given out by governments. Yeah. And governments, as we all know, are very efficient and very fast and perfect, right? Yeah. So understand that what happens is when you are not the resident of a particular country, every country, doesn't matter if it's the US, doesn't matter if it's a European country, if it's Mexico, if it's China, every country has an element of what they call protectionism, which means they want to make sure that their residents and their citizens are employed to the best degree possible before they start giving jobs away, which there's some sense to that. But of course, as artists, as writers, we know that this talent is so unique, and it's not guaranteed you're just going to find it here, because what Pietro can do, nobody else can do. So at least not in the same way. So the first thing to know is what will qualify you for a visa. Most countries, if you want to qualify for a work visa, you have to have some sort of higher degree. I know universities are expensive. You don't have to go to an expensive university. You can go to any basic college, get a degree, and just so long as you have that piece of paper, you can apply for visas. Now, in the United States, which I know better, meaning I know the laws of it better than I know the laws of, say, Spain or the EU, we have different types of visas, and different countries get different degrees of priority. So for instance, there's a North American treaty whereby the citizens of the United States, Canada, and Mexico have an easier time getting work visas in each other's countries. And Australia also has its own special status there. There's the standard US work visa, the H-1B visa. There's a very limited number that's given out every year. It's a lottery. It's not an impossible lottery. It's like 33%, 1/3. But it's still not 66%, it's not 2/3, you know? And there's a price to pay, but oftentimes the company will pay that price. It's a lot for the individual, it's not so much for the company. But that's a lottery, it's a gamble. Because there's like, say, 60,000 a year. Think about all the companies in the United States that want to give out a visa. It's not that many jobs. There's another one that we call the artist's visa, but it actually applies to artists, athletes, scientists. That's the O1B visa. And that usually is, you're a cultural asset.
Yes.
So you have demonstrated, it doesn't mean you have to have an Academy Award or a BAFTA. It means that in your country you have demonstrated because you have written something that got written about, you know, that got well reviewed, or maybe it won some film festivals. And the more that you have of that, the easier you make it to petition. So what each company has to do is we have to make an argument to our government that this person is so unique that we have tried to fill this position with US citizens and US residents, but this person tops all of that. This person is too unique. And the more ammunition that you can give us to make that argument, to plead that argument to our government, the better the chances that the visa will be granted. So that's for the US. As I said, I don't know. We have a whole other recruiting team in Madrid and they know the laws there better than I do. But I do know that in Madrid, it's easier to get a visa for many people from around the world. I know that they have, at least I heard, I would look into this, don't trust me on this, that they have certain incentives for work visas if you are under the age of 30, because they're trying to encourage more young people to come and work in Spain. So those are some things to consider. So apply. I mean, yes, there's a cost. Yes, that is something to consider. But also, you know, to get what we want, it requires sacrifice. Life isn't easy and life isn't fair is the thing that by 38, you know this. Life isn't fair. And so you will have to pay and you will have to make some sort of sacrifice to get what you want. And to the extent that you can always ask a company, hey, you like me, you said you like me, would you sponsor my visa? You can ask them that. Maybe they'll say yes, maybe they'll say no. So if you want to work for another country, I would say, you know, get a degree, even if it's just from a city college, and apply. It's not easy, but it's very doable. I mean, there are lots of people from all over the world working in countries that they weren't born in. It's totally doable, you know? I mean, you're a perfect example.
I'm Italian, I'm here.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. And I went through the whole O1 visa experience. So once you understand how it works, I think it's easier. It's not that long. I mean, without getting into much detail, but it's definitely something I discovered recently is that I could get the O1 and work from here for a while. And I never thought about that, so now I want to apply again.
Yeah, you were asking about like the world being remote and tying it back to COVID. That's absolutely true. It has made it much easier. Now there are certain companies, usually bigger ones, major corporations that can hire from anywhere in the world or that can freelance from anywhere in the world. Some companies don't quite have that ease. Some companies have restrictions on where they can, you know, recruit from or how long they can work with a freelancer. And oftentimes that depends on where that company is incorporated. Companies that are incorporated in California has a lot of regulation. And so it can restrict a company's ability to work with freelancers in certain ways or to hire people from other states or other countries. So I would research it, but yeah.
You said something that we repeat a lot in our community, which is almost a mantra of always apply. If you can help us bash some of the myths that we have about recruiting. Something I hear a lot is like recruiters don't even look at your portfolios or resumes, especially now all companies are using AI and it will never get to them. You know, all these things or this style of portfolio or this style of resume, more artistic. Tell us, you know, how do you perceive that from the other side? Do you look at a resume and see that's formatted more politely, there's a good way, a bad way? Because I think sometimes we get lost in the minutia, and if we can, you know, encourage people to focus on what really matters, I think that there's nobody better to ask this.
I can't speak for all recruiters in all companies. there's variety. I am sure that there are companies, especially companies that use third-party recruiters that don't work for that company. I'm sure many use some degree of AI. I can guarantee you right now that neither I nor my colleagues use AI. That is an absolute promise. You can audit us. We don't use AI. We really don't. I'll really break it down. This may be a little monotonous, but I think it's actually good information to have.
Absolutely.
We don't use AI. I use LinkedIn Recruiter, which I think has like, when I write somebody an email through LinkedIn Recruiter, there's an AI function that says, would you like the email to start like this a little bit? But I don't even use that. But I'm sure maybe one of my colleagues does, I don't know.
Yeah, we all inadvertently use AI in any situation.
Maybe in the most minimal way, like never say never, but AI is not a tool that I am currently using or that I have any plans to use. I won't predict the future and I won't make any promises that I can't keep, but I can tell you that right now I don't use it. I have no plans to use it. The reason is because for me, it has to do with my taste. I mean, for me, I don't have any reason to trust that the machine will do a better job, you know? So let's lift the veil and explain what happens when you submit your CV and your portfolio link to the black hole that no one ever watches, no one ever reads, it disappears, and goodbye, and you'll never hear from anybody. Here's the truth of what actually happens on the other side. All of us recruiters, we work with something called an ATS, an applicant tracking system. Nobody knows if the S stands for system or software.
Okay.
Applicant tracking system, applicant tracking software. And basically what it is you've applied and now somewhere on the back end, to put it very crudely, there is a long list of names of people who applied. Do I use certain filters? Sure, if I really need this person to know Maya, because this person is going, or ZBrush, because this person is going to be a ZBrush modeler, maybe I'll apply a filter for ZBrush, because if you don't have that on your CV, then okay, you saw the job description, you applied anyway, that's nobody else's fault, really, you know? But broadly speaking, I don't really use that. I start going through the lists, I'll post the job, I'll give it a couple of days for people to start applying, and my job as a recruiter is to find enough good applicants to send to my hiring manager. Some hiring managers are more hands-on and they like to go into the applicant tracking system and look at the applicants. But broadly speaking, the recruiter's job is to do that first filtration, that first pass, and find who are the top applicants. Now, my job is just to find enough applicants, like a manageable number for my hiring manager, which is usually somewhere between 5 and 10 at a time. And statistically speaking, there is no science behind this. This is just my casual observation. But when I've posted jobs for 3D modeler, for character designer, for finance, for engineering, for some reason, it's always about 10% of applicants have a competitive skill set, or a competitive resume, or a competitive portfolio, depending on what they're applying for. So let's say 50 people applied. That means on average, 5 of them are going to be really possible contenders, right? But we only have one position. Now let's say 500 people applied. Okay, so statistically 50 of them have what I need. So if you have the skill set that is needed on the job description and you feel like 500 people have applied, don't worry about that number 500. You're not competing against 499 other people. You're really just competing against 49 other people on average. But I can't send 50 resumes to my hiring manager because my hiring manager has a job to do.
Yeah.
You're right? My hiring manager has to take time away from the day job to participate in the interviews. So again, a manageable number is 5 or 10. So let's say 500 people applied. I find 10 resumes that I think are really strong. That means I went through about 100 resumes to find those 10. That means there's still 400 that didn't even get looked at. Okay? So now I send those 10 to my hiring manager, and my hiring manager says, you know what? I disagree with you. I didn't like these 10. Try again. Okay, I go through another 100. I found another 10. I send those to my hiring manager. There's still 300 people that never got looked at.
Okay.
And until my hiring manager says, go get me some more resumes, I'm actually not looking through the others because a recruiter typically has 10, 15 positions that we're working on at any given time. So I just don't have time to do all this work if I have all this other work to do. So now my hiring manager says, you know what, out of these 10, I really like these 5. Let's interview them. Great, we interview those 5. And then he says, okay, let's hire this one. Great, we hired this one. There's still 300 that didn't even get looked at. And out of them, 30 are probably really good. Could have been strong contenders. Will I look at them at some point? Sure, because I like to see who's in there, and I'll mark them for future, but it doesn't help them in this moment. What would have helped them is if they had Googled, what is the email format? And sent me an email and said, hey, I applied for this position. It doesn't guarantee that you have what I'm looking for, but it guarantees that you won't be in that group of 300 that didn't even get looked at, okay? I will 100% look. And you don't always know which recruiter to reach out to. There might be 5 recruiters or 10 recruiters working at a studio. You don't know which of them is the recruiter overseeing this position. It doesn't matter, because if I get an email saying, oh, I applied to this job and I see it's not one of my jobs, it's okay, I'll forward that email immediately to one of my colleagues. I have never, ever just deleted the email, That would be a very cruel thing to do. So your email will get through. And if you are worried that you are submitting into this void, into this black hole, and no one will ever hear, the best guarantee that you have is to go on LinkedIn, Google who are the recruiters at Skydance, or who are the recruiters at Disney, who are the recruiters at Pixar, whatever company you're applying to. Email one of them, because now you've Googled the email format, and say, I applied to this position. Here's my CV attached, here's my portfolio link, and take a look. I guarantee you will hear back. Maybe you will hear back, sorry, it's no good, but at least now you have some kind of dialogue going. You're taking command of your application. So I would say that's, but as far as do we use AI, maybe it could be a useful tool in some ways, but...
Yeah, for those 300 maybe that you couldn't possibly
go through,
it's not necessarily... but it's very scary for people to think, I will never be selected. And the format of the about the resume really matter. There's this debate of, everything should be clean, line by line, like Word document, or put your picture or things like that. Or is it just irrelevant? What's your...
We go through resumes so quickly that the only thing that's really important is for it to be clear.
Okay.
That's the most important. I don't need it to be a fancy resume. It could be a simple Word doc. Personally, I prefer that when you list what you did I worked at this job from 2020 until 2023. I prefer to see what you did on the job in bullet points. It's easier for me to read quickly than paragraphs. That's the only thing I really prefer, and most recruiters I talk to prefer that, but I won't sit here and say all recruiters. I'm sure there are differences of opinion. I don't need a fancy resume. I just need something that's clear. I don't recommend, unless you're an actor, putting your photograph on the resume, at least for the United States. Because in the US, we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We have certain protected characteristics. That means there are certain attributes of a person that we cannot use either positively or negatively when considering that person for the job. So if we see that you are a white man or a black woman or whatever the case may be, because of your photograph, immediately there's a chance of a suggestion of some sort of either preferential prejudice or negative prejudice that we don't want to be accused of. So we would rather not see a photo. It's all cultural, in some cultures it's very common to say, I'm this age, I'm married, I have kids, it's like giving a personal biography. Again, speaking only for US applications, or if you're from outside of the US but you're applying to a US company, I would remove that information and just keep it to business.
It's interesting because when I apply to US jobs, I see that there's almost always a category that has to do more with diversity. So you can check boxes of, ethnicity. And for example, I'm Italian. My dad was born in Africa, and I have a kind of international background. And then I see all those boxes. What is from a lot of personal information in most companies, and that's something that you would probably want to answer in the form, but not put into the resume.
Yeah, and there's no law that says you have to answer it in the form. There's always the option to opt out, to decline to answer. So just to be very clear, a recruiter and a hiring manager will never see that information. It's gathered purely for statistical purposes so that we can gauge, later on we can run statistics and we don't see it attached to any name or any particular profile. We just see, okay, this many people self-identified as African American, this many people self-identified as female, this many people self-identified as et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It has nothing to do with getting the job. It only has to do, so that later on we can say, you know what, for some reason, we're really not reaching women with these jobs.
Yeah.
Why might that be? You know, and if we want to try to do better at hiring more women, it doesn't mean that we're suddenly going to disregard all men who apply. It just means that we might change our tactic. Maybe we'll start posting these jobs with women in animation, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you answer those questions, never worry that it's something that's positively or negatively impacting the consideration of your job, of you for the job. Yeah, it's just statistical.
To know. Okay, so I wanted to talk cover letters and maybe explore a little bit of the past for a producer that's very different from something that is more, you know, in the art or writing. So first of all, that's something that it's often required, a cover letter, and that you hear all these internet tapes and there's nothing like hearing from you. How does a good cover letter look like?
Good cover letter. Okay, so first of all, if you're an artist, chances are very low that anybody will read a cover letter. I hate to say that because I know people put a lot of hard work into it. If you're a writer, we probably want to see a cover letter. We want to see how you write. Oftentimes though now, especially if you're sending an email, the body of the email can substitute for a cover letter. But let's talk about traditional cover letters. People still write them, people still read them. It should be fairly short, no more than half, maximum 2/3 of a page. And it's not just a narrative rehashing of your resume. You don't need to say, I did this and I did that. We see that on your CV. We don't need that in your cover letter. The cover letter should show, it should be an appeal for why you are going to be the best person for this job. And you have to walk a very fine line because you want to express confidence and self-assuredness that you know what you're doing and that you are the best, but you also don't want to be arrogant. So the best way I would say to do that is to start by saying something along the lines of, my name is Ariel Goldberg, I applied for this job because, and then you start saying, you know, all the things that you're going to do really well. I have experience doing this. I've really proven myself here. I understand that you're looking for this and that, and I've already done this. I've proven myself in all these fields. And then you start throwing in a little bit of humility and you say, I'm still at the beginning of my career. I still have a lot to learn. And some of the key areas that I would love to develop are this and this and that. And I think I can develop them best at your company because I really love that you have these values, that you are making these business decisions, etc. That shows, on the one hand, you're complimenting the company and everybody loves to have their egos stroked. And on the other hand, you're showing that you did your research. And you're doing one other thing. You're showing that you really believe in this company and you believe in yourself having a future here. You want to not just take this job, but you see yourself growing with this company. And that means that you're not a flight risk, that you're not going to discover in 2 weeks that you're bored with this job and just leave. And now we have to open it up and go through the whole recruitment process again. You're showing that you have a degree of reliability. So that's kind of how I would do it. Start out very confident. You know, this is why I'm right for this job. And then bring in a little humility. I still have some things to learn, and I really want to learn them at your company because I think your company is doing really great with A, B, and C. Thank you so much for your consideration. Please let me know if there's any additional material that I can provide or information that I can provide. Short, sweet, to the point, something that somebody can read in a minute and a half. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Let's think about the path of a producer. You know, there are so many kinds of producing roles. And if somebody sees themselves as a producer in the future and they love animation, what could be an entry-level position and what is the best way to showcase that you have, you know, producing ability?
Yeah, the best way is to take any kind of, if you really don't have a lot of experience in the industry, and a lot of people won't, well, even before I get to this, the general path of a producer is you start as a production assistant, you become a production coordinator. In some studios, the next step is a production manager. In some other studios, there's an intermediary step, production supervisor, then production manager, then associate producer, then line producer, right? Then executive producer. So that's the path. It can take a long time. It to get from A to Z, but that's the path. So how do you become a production assistant? Sometimes you can start as an executive assistant to a producer and move up from there. Sometimes you can be such a great executive assistant that you can even skip the production assistant path and go straight to production coordinator. But if you are trying to apply for these production assistant jobs, again, those are some of the jobs that a lot of people apply to. The best thing you can do is find a community of people who are maybe making independent films, or go to a university where they have an animation program and offer your services to some of the animators who are doing their thesis film and say, hey, I need experience as a producer. You don't have a producer. I will offer my services to you for free. It's a lot of work to do for free, but if you don't have anything on your resume yet, that could be a great way to build it. And figure out what the state-of-the-art cutting-edge tools are, ShotGrid, FileMaker Pro, those sorts of things. Make sure you're good with Excel and PowerPoint and Microsoft, Outlook, Google, all of that. And just show that you have accountability, reliability, that you're a self-starter, that you're organized, proactive. So yeah, just go to the universities and start offering your skills for free. Students will give you the opportunity, you get it on your resume, and especially if it's a school with a good reputation or a good program, I mean, that could be a great resume builder. But also, don't be ashamed to put that you worked as a barista at Starbucks.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because if you were a barista at Starbucks between October and February, and you had to work that Christmas season at Starbucks, I know that you had to deal with a lot of, pardon the expression, with a lot of BS.
Yeah.
You had to deal with a lot of angry people, a lot of demanding people who want this kind of milk, not that kind of milk, this kind of sweetener, not that kind of sweetener. You got my order wrong, I wanted this size. You have the customer wants one thing, your boss wants another thing. You have to manage both sets of expectations, and you survived the job. I know that, okay, maybe you didn't do anything that had to do with producing, but you did everything that had to do with producing.
I love that. Yeah.
Because you are organized, a self-starter, you know how to work under pressure, and those customer service jobs should not leave your resume until you've gotten a couple of jobs that are in your specific discipline. Trust me, we hire people who show their competence through their customer service jobs.
I love that. It makes me think about, we have our Write for Animation Academy. It's a membership we have online to sustain what you do. And think about two people. One is a young lady. She's applying to all the studios, and she has a lot of experience coordinating teams for events and stuff. And I see her as a producer. And then I think, of course, about our producer at Write for Animation. Like, he has to organize with the video teams, remote people, editing, YouTube schedule, and everything we do there. I've seen producers in feature films, and that's the job. And then, of course, you get more fluent in the software. That's really interesting. So I think it's a very encouraging, and customer service, being able to,
Yeah. And if you're switching, look, if you've been a producer for Write for Animation, right, but you haven't been a producer on an animated film, if you're switching industries, let's say you've produced events, but now you want to produce for animation, there's certain technologies, certain parts of the pipeline that you don't know. You would probably be a really great contender, but you can't make a lateral move from producer to producer when you switch industries, because you still have a lot to learn. So you might have to take 1 or even 2 steps back, maybe even 3 steps back sometimes. When you switch industries, it's hard. I've switched industries, I was working as a production artist, and then I went to recruitment. When I went to recruitment, I went from being a production artist, working in games, making great money, and then I went to being a recruiting coordinator, making a lot less money. But I wanted to make the change. And so, again, sometimes you have to take, it sounds cliche, but you have to take 2 steps back to take 3 steps forward. Sometimes that's just what has to happen. So just know that when you switch the industry, you can't always do it as a lateral shift. It's usually a few steps back to catch up on the things that you haven't learned yet that are specific to that particular industry. So yeah, if you want to go and be a producer in animation and you've produced somewhere else before, but you haven't done animation, that's fantastic. Just know that you might have to be a production coordinator or production supervisor first.
That's awesome. So let's end with maybe something I haven't asked. Maybe that could be key for people that you encounter every day, and maybe there's something that you can help them with. What would be the number one thing that they could do differently, or the message that you want to send out to them?
The number one message, I say this a lot, and Whitney, my colleague, and I are doing a presentation tomorrow, and I'm sure I'll say this tomorrow too. And this ties back to what I was saying earlier about giving more than getting, being of use. In your career, and not just in your career, but in life, You are more assured of getting what you want or what you need when you can convince the person in whose power it is to give it to you that it will benefit his bottom line to give it to you. Don't just say, I want it, I want it, I want it. Tell them, this is going to be good for you. You want this. You want this. Because yes, it's going to be good for me, but it's going to be even better for you. The example I give is you're in high school and there's a big party going on and everyone's going to be there and you need to borrow your dad's car to go there. But your dad doesn't want to lend you the car because maybe you've got bad grades or something. And so you start complaining. You say, Dad, come on, it's my social life. You're killing my social life if you don't let me go to this party, if you don't let me borrow the car. And he doesn't care, he's a hard ass. So then you start pleading with him, come on, you've always been such a great dad. You're so wonderful, I love you so much. He doesn't care. And then you have a better idea. And you say, you know what, Dad? I know you wanted to watch the football match on the game. And I know that Mom asked you to pick up the groceries from the store. How about this? If you lend me the car to go to the party, when I come home, I'll buy the groceries with my own money. And not only that, but I see the car is half empty, I'll fill it up for you with my own money. Now Dad is interested, right? Because you're not just telling him what you want, you're also saying that you're willing to give him what he wants, what he needs. Again, everyone has a boss. Dad's boss is always Mom, So but it's the same thing. When a recruiter opens a position, as the candidate, you can think, what are the pressures that are acting on this recruiter? This recruiter has to satisfy the hiring team. The hiring team has big expectations that this recruiter will give them a good candidate. So you come in and you say, yes, I want this job, but I know you need a good candidate. And that's me. Look at all the stuff that I can bring. You're going to impress your hiring team when you bring my candidacy to them. You can't say it directly like that. That sounds very pompous, but that's what it has to be between the lines. And those hiring managers, why are they filling the position? Because once you move through the recruiter, now you have to meet with the hiring team. What do you want them to believe? Well, this art director has a producer that's saying, how come you're not hitting your deadlines? How come your art team isn't, putting out assets as quickly as we need? Well, you need somebody great on your team that's going to work really fast and get great results so that your producer stops bugging you. So every time that you can put it in terms where somebody understands like, oh, I'm going to have an easier life if I hire you or if I give you what you need, that's when you have a recipe for success. Not when you keep telling them like, I have a dream, I have a dream. It's beautiful that you have a dream. We love that you have a dream. We do care, but that's not enough for us to give you the job.
I love that. I think it's a great way to end, and it's been a pleasure, Ariel.
It's a pleasure, yeah.
It's amazing for me. You shared so much. I think it's a mini masterclass.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's really great to talk about this. It's my big passion to make sure young people know what they have to do to get work,
Amazing. That was amazing, Ariel. And it gets even better. Ariel and Anne Whitney McCombs answered 4 crucial questions at the Pixelatl Film Festival that made me rethink my CV and change my entire approach to social media. How can I make sure my email actually gets read by recruiters?
Whether you're sending an email after an event like this, or you're just sending a cold email, the most important thing is to be very specific and keep it very, very short. Because recruiters, we have absolutely insane email inboxes. Just for perspective, we have a whole day job that has nothing to do with emails, and then we have to check our emails at the end of the day. And throughout the day, we might be getting about 20 or 30 emails every hour. So that's why sometimes you don't hear back, because at the end of the day, when we're answering our emails, we can do it for whatever, an hour, 2 hours. But then at a certain point, we deserve a life too. So the shorter you can keep your email, the better.
What you also want to do is after events, when you're collecting business cards, it's good to send a follow-up after the event, but also just remember that everyone's exchanging business cards. So you're hitting an inbox that there's other people reaching out. So don't be afraid to bump it back up after. So give it a week or 2, and if you haven't heard, just kindly say, hey, I'm just bumping this back up. I know you're probably still catching up after the festival, and try and make it personable. Like if you talk to them specifically about a certain thing, or you're like, hey, I'm the girl with the pink hair. Do you remember me? So having like that personable, like reminding them who you are, make sure to link like either your portfolio site or your LinkedIn, so that we can have like some type of calling card or picture. And keep it short and keep in touch. we are a casual industry, and so it doesn't have to be super formal. So if I was writing an email saying, hi, this is Whitney, we met at Pixelatl at the Skydance Animation talk. Thank you so much for speaking. This section of the talk really resonated with me. I really enjoyed that sizzle reel. I just wanted to let you know I wanted to send you over my portfolio materials. I've attached my resume. I'm really excited about Skydance as a company, and I hope we can stay in touch for future opportunities. That's all you have to say and sign off from there. That's like that short and sweet email. Sometimes you can have a little bit more questions, and so that's how you kind of keep the relationship going. So you start with that short and sweet email, but say you have a question about Skydance, that's how you kind of get a response. So, hey, I'm a character designer. I really enjoyed the talk. The images of the ray gun characters really inspired me, and I was wondering about like future character design opportunities. Do you have any timeline for that? And then that would give you a response. And what's really important is as you're keeping up that relationship with a recruiter or an art director, production designer, head of story, you don't always want to be the person that only reaches out for a job. So you can also find times that are more casual to congratulate. So we said we had Spellbound coming out this year. So Spellbound releases, if you go and watch it on Netflix, say, hey, I'm Whitney, or hey, Ariel, I just saw Spellbound on Netflix. I absolutely loved it. The songs in it were amazing. Just wanted to send you a congratulations. Hope we can reconnect soon in the future. And those are ways that you can touch base with recruiters without always asking for a job. So then when you do ask for the job or you're ready for that job search, it's not going to feel so formal and transactional because you've already started building that relationship.
Completely agree with what Amy said. If you don't ask a question, then you're not soliciting a response. So it's good to ask a question and not just say, thank you so much, period. Do ask a question. But because we get so many emails, maybe you have 10 questions you want to ask. Don't ask all 10. Ask one. Don't even ask two. Just ask one. Because if you ask one, we can quickly reply. If it takes us a long time to reply, we may not be able to. But if you give us something that's easy for us to reply to and it's quick, we'll answer one question. You can follow up with another. We'll answer that one. And that way you can ask all 10 questions over 10 emails, but not all in one email. So yeah.
I've got a script idea. How can I pitch it to Skydance Animation?
We do meet with writers all the time. Our development team is always, and Whitney and I help our development team to meet with writers and to meet with directors. Typically, if you have ideas, it's good to have a lawyer or an agent represent you. It's very hard because when writers approach us and they send us materials, we can't open those materials or read them because there are legal reasons where, we could be accountable if we, if we are producing something that's similar to an idea that you send us, we don't want to be liable for being mistaken that we took an idea from somebody else. We would never want to do that. And so that's why when writers approach us, it's best to go through a lawyer or through an agent. But I would say the first step, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. The first step I would say is connect with us on LinkedIn, connect with us on email, we'll start a conversation, and we'll keep that conversation going. It's hard to go straight to David Ellison and Dana Goldberg, just because they're very, very busy. But you can start with us, and we will start the conversation. It usually will take a little while. Be prepared for it to take some time. Don't let that be discouraging. But I would say, start with the recruiters, start with the development team, and go from there.
Is it a good idea to share your work on social media?
I do use Instagram, I do use ArtStation. I know right now there are a lot of concerns about artificial intelligence and the way that Instagram and ArtStation, I love Instagram, I love ArtStation, don't sue me either. I know that right now people have concerns about how their artwork is protected. And I know that there's some new platforms coming around. Kara, exactly. Not a lot of recruiters have discovered Kara yet, so just so you know, if you're putting stuff on Kara, maybe not everyone is seeing your stuff. So I do always recommend, even if you're using social media, which you should be using, but having your own dedicated portfolio site, whether you build it through Squarespace or Wix or whatever you do, there are many different platforms you can use. They're all great for different reasons. If you're worried about putting your artwork out there, so social media it's more like you put everything there and it stays there, and then stuff that you might be really proud of, unless you pin it to the top, it will eventually go down, down, down. Whereas your website, it should be more curated. You take out the older stuff, as you put in the newer stuff, you decide, I will have 30 pieces if I'm a visual development artist, and once I reach 31, I need to take one out to keep it at 30. For instance, I'm making that number up. A lot of people are 10 pieces, some people are 50 pieces, it depends. If you're a story artist, maybe you need 3 or 4 sequences. We don't have time to look at much more than that. You cycle them out, and if you're worried about your artwork being online, you can always put it under a password protection, and then when you email the recruiter or submit an application, you just include the password on your CV, and that way it's always protected. A recruiter will never give away your artwork or anything to anybody else. We might share it internally to review your work, but we will never just expose it. So I think social media is a great way to go, but I do recommend also having your own website. It takes time to build it. It takes an investment, but I think it's worth it, because that's the easiest way for us to see where are you now. And then your social media is great because it can show just some more of your fun stuff that you do just on the side. Yeah.
What should I include in my CV if I don't have any experience in animation yet?
If you don't have industry experience, don't be afraid to put your other experience and figure out what does a production assistant or what does a story artist need to do that uses the skills that I have from another job. And also maybe you went to school and maybe you studied this discipline. So don't just put, oh, I went to this academic program. Take some of the projects that you like, your thesis film that you made, and put that under your experience. Your experience doesn't have to be your job experience. It can be experience that you don't give me the homework assignment that you did in one night, but if you had something that you did for a full semester or a full year for school, I won't know that just by seeing I got this bachelor's degree in 2023. No, I want to see, okay, but what did you actually do? I directed a film. I did this, and this. List it just like a job. Don't make it sound bigger than what it is. Say, this was my thesis project. I did it for school. But now I see, okay, you have professional experience because you've worked customer service or whatever, and you have in your school, you've been a director. So now I see you haven't worked in the industry, but you have some good experience, yeah.
Meeting Ariel and Anne Whitney at Pixelatl is proof of how attending festivals can change your career and your life. But what if you're not a natural when it comes to putting yourself out there? Don't worry, click here and let's learn from another top recruiter on how to prepare for your next animation festival. I'm Pietro, this is WFA Animation, and I'll see you in the video.